What's up guys, Manny from Motomillion. It's time to upgrade our front brakes on our Panigale V2. Well, I said it's time to upgrade our front brakes, but we've already started the process. If you've been watching our Panigale V2 build, we already addressed our master cylinder, but next on the line are the calipers. I think the calipers are a weak point on this Panigale V2. If you take a look, our front calipers are the Brembo M4.32 calipers. These things are pretty archaic. I think they were introduced all the way back in 2007 with the 1098. And pardon for a lack of better word because I'm saying archaic. I don't think there's any nicer way to describe these calipers, but the technology has come a long way and we're going to be upgrading with the Stylema calipers and also a few other components along the way. So let me show you those parts quickly. So here's our new calipers. I mean, there's a mountain of calipers that we could be using on the Panigale V2. It's a 100mm front caliper, and we could use the GP4MS, GP4RX, the Stylemas, and I think we're being thoughtful with this build because we want to make something really nice that's worthy of the Motomillion name, but we don't want to go spend unlimited budget because I know that most of us who ride a Panigale V2 are probably not on an unlimited budget, and I want to do things. Yes, we're doing some crazy things, but I also want to do sensible things like upgrading to these Stylema calipers. Ever since these calipers were introduced on the aftermarket world, because they were first introduced on the Panigale V4 back in 2018, these have been an amazing addition to the braking upgrade lineup on motorcycles. These things fit the S1000RRs, they fit the Panigale V2s, and I think they are the best bang for the buck for calipers that's out and available. I always say it, I always refer to my friend who's a professional racer. They build these budget race bikes and they say they always stick to the Stylema calipers. They cannot believe how good of a performance these calipers give. So these are going to be direct bolt-on on our Panigale V2. Along the way, we're going to be upgrading our bleeder valves to make everything easier for us. We're going to be using our Stylebus bleeder valves. And since we upgraded our front rotors, so if you guys watched the video where we installed our beautiful Aussie Racing wheels on this bike, we did oversize our front rotors to the Panigale V4 size rotors, 330mm, and that means that we could run caliper spacers, which we are running right now. We're going to remove those caliper spacers, and instead we're going to be running these beautiful full 6 brake cooling ducts because these are your caliper spacers that you need on the Panigale V4 and on the Panigale V2 if you're using the oversized front rotor. They're going to give some cooling. I'll talk about the benefits of it when we're installing it, but these are also going to go on the bike. And as you can see guys, this is our caliper spacers that we added to be able to run the 330mm rotor on our Panigale V2. The spacers are usually on this side of the caliper. I guess Ducati doesn't want to run a bunch of different caliper bolt sizes, so that's why it has the spacers on the top. But in this case, we've swapped them around. There's a video on that on our YouTube page if you want to check out that side of the build if you haven't seen it and you're interested. But right now, what we're going to do is we're going to replace those caliper spacers with our cooling ducts that have the same thickness, but also they provide additional cooling onto the calipers. Let's get this out. Perfect. So what I did first was I just swapped over the Banjo bolts while everything was in place, and I installed it on our Stylema caliper. And then I took out the caliper that's loaded up with all the brake fluid and I'll replace it with this one. And I want to remind you guys that none of our videos are actually instructional videos. We just show you guys the process of our builds. We'll give a tip or two while we're doing things like, hey, if you want to change your calipers, if you're up to it, not that I'm saying that you should mess around with your braking system yourself. If you feel confident enough, you could go ahead and do it. But if you're doing it, it's a quick little tip that you could swap the Banjo and the lines over before putting the caliper in place. It makes it a lot easier and also easier to manage all the mess that you're about to make by undoing that Banjo off your stock caliper. Let's put this in place. There we go. I'm just going to run one of the bolts here just to hold everything in place. Okay, before I go any further, let's do some explaining. I said that these Stylema calipers are great, and let me tell you why they're great before I even go forward, because some of you guys are interested in this information. And don't forget, we're never paid by any of these companies to use their products nor say these things. It's just our personal research that we do over here to make sure that we're building something that deserves the Motomillion name. In this case, the Motomillion Panigale V2 deserves this V2 calipers because, as I mentioned, this caliper here is a little archaic, and if you watch my first ride, I wasn't too happy with the brake feel of the Panigale V2, even though I was very happy with the feel overall of this bike. And I think this is a common ground with people who ride the Panigale V2s. They always think that the brakes could be better, and it's kind of the letdown of the motorcycle, or let's call it the low point of the motorcycle. And that's what we're trying to fix with all these things that we're doing. But the Stylema is a great choice because, number one, the price is amazing. It comes in at a very low cost for a very good caliper. And what makes the Stylema caliper great is that they produced this caliper for Ducati in 2018 to run on the Panigale V4s. At the time, their casting technology had come so forward that they could make this caliper to be as stiff as possible with being as light as possible, and it yielded some great results. The Panigale V4 has some really good brakes from the factory, which is unlike the Ducatis that we were used to at the time. Imagine, this is 4 or 5 years ago as of the filming of this video. And this caliper also was stiffer than some of their old CNC machine 2-piece calipers that they had, which was an amazing achievement on the time. That makes this thing amazing because the price is great. It looks great too, because you could also get it in silver, black, or red. But in this case of our Panigale V2 build, we're going along with that black and silver theme on the bike. These things suit the bike the best. Also, this is not as expensive as the colored ones. There's a tiny little price difference, but it also matches our rear caliper. I want to maybe try to do something red on here if I can, but I'm not a real painter, so we got to figure out how we could do it to get things matching. But right now, let's finish off the front caliper, at least on one side, and then as we go along, I'm going to talk about the other components. Well, now that all the components on the right side are on and we know what's fitting and what's not fitting, luckily everything is fitting pretty well. Surprise, the Pro Tie showed up. I didn't show this at the beginning of the video because I was not sure if this was the right way forward, because this is the first time that we're doing this on a Panigale V2. So, a couple tips. If you're upgrading from an M4.32 caliper on your Panigale V2 to a Stylema caliper, you're going to need shorter caliper bolts because I think it's called the deck height. I'm going to call it the deck height. The deck height of this caliper is taller than the Stylemas. And in this case, you could run Panigale V4 spec caliper bolts. It works perfectly. It's the correct size when we are running these calipers on a Panigale V2. Secondly, if you're running Pro Tie bolts or any kind of titanium bolts on your motorcycle, especially if it's an M8 bolt or larger, like the ones that we use on our calipers here, make sure you use some titanium anti-seize. Last thing you want is that titanium seizing onto your fork legs. It does happen, different types of materials coming together. Over time, the corrosion, it kind of fuses together. It makes a very ugly situation, so that's your second tip. The third tip, if you want to run these things, these are not meant for the Panigale V2, neither a Panigale V2 with the Öhlins forks and this setup. It works great. It's a little tight over here. It's kind of touching. It's not touching to the point that it made it crack. I thought it was going to crack the carbon. For me, it works great. The fit is tight. It's not perfect. It's not unsafe, it's not unusable. I'm happy with it. I'm going to keep it like this. We'll see over time. We will let you guys know if the vibrations, which I think it's going to be fine, you know, it's not going to damage it, but we'll keep you guys informed as we do progress with our Panigale V2 build and after our first ride as well, because I'm dying to ride this thing. So let me jump on the other side. I got to repeat all the steps that I did on this side on the other side, and then we're going to do our final bleeding. And then I think this episode is going to be done. Now we're on the left side of the bike. We're about to put this caliper on. I noticed something that I should probably let you guys know. Again, it's one of those little details, very technical detail that some of you guys get bored of it, but most of you guys seem to like stuff like this. I put it in the comments and I read the comments, guys. So this QR code here, you should remove it obviously because it's not supposed to be here when you install it. This is your new authenticity code / authenticity check for your Brembo products that you get. Way back in the day, they used to come with just a card that said it's authentic. They counterfeited a card. It's not hard to do that. Then they came with a card with a code that you have to log into a website. I guess they got around that too. Now Brembo, I think about 2-3 years ago, there is a brand new app that they have. I think it's called the Brembo Authenticity app. You could Google it. You could see if your Brembo product is legitimate or not. So that's what these little QR codes are. I'm gonna remove it. Luckily, these new ones don't leave too much of a mess behind. Before, they used to leave a lot of sticky residue. Maybe they got some feedback from customers saying that you guys have to make this easier. And as I said it, I jinxed myself because this is stuck really nicely on there. But I'll clean this up as well before I get this caliper on. But I want to make sure you guys knew what this QR code was on your calipers and on your other Brembo products. Well, here's a little tip, guys. Not just this tip, but I make the paper towels like this, or if you have shop towels, not to clean my ears while I'm working on the bike, but you could dip it into your head of your bleeder valve, right? So to remove all the excess brake fluid that's in there, because once you tighten this bolt, the brake fluid doesn't go past almost near this bolt, right? So it's from the bottom that it blocks it, but there's still brake fluid that's left in there that with heat and using of the brakes, it might actually start coming off. But if you do it like this, and if you do it a few more times, you could be sure that number one, there's no more brake fluid in there. Number two, you could double check for leaks. If that has any fluid in there after that, means that your Banjo is leaking or your bleeder is bleeding in this case. And so yeah, that's a little tip. And also, it satisfies my OCD knowing that there's no fluid in there anymore. Well, I think that's a success, guys, because our calipers are on. The brake feels amazing already, and I'm not even done bleeding yet. So I bled the calipers, I bled the master cylinder, but the next step is to zip tie this thing overnight with a lever. So that allows all the air bubbles that are trapped in there, if there is any, to come all the way to the top. And also, it's a safety thing that we could inspect the bike for leaks when we leave it all pressed in. So that's something that you got to take into consideration. So I know if I don't mention the brake fluid, you guys are going to say in the comments below what kind of brake fluid that we use. We use the HTC 64T from Brembo because it's the least compressible brake fluid. We'll go into details of these things when we film our brake upgrade guide for a Panigale V2. And in terms of brake upgrades, we upgraded our calipers on this bike today. Visually, it looks stunning because not just the caliper is better looking, but these brake cooling ducts work perfectly. Let's talk about the brake cooling ducts while we're talking about them. So on a motorcycle, what do these things do? They push all of the dirt and dust away, so it lengthens your seal life, because if you don't push away the dust from your calipers, it cakes onto your pistons, that gets hot, especially if you're a track rider. So not only this thing cools your caliper down, but it also pushes that dust away. So it's a win-win when you install this. I think it's a win-win-win because it looks amazing. And speaking of the calipers, we saved weight with the calipers for sure, because the Stylema's selling point when they first came out was that they're the lightest cast caliper and the stiffest cast caliper that Brembo had made. There is no way for us to accurately measure it here, right? Because the calipers that we took off has brake fluid in it, and the calipers that we were putting on were completely dry, so it wouldn't be fair. And obviously it would be heavier, the part that we took off, and the part that we were putting on would be lighter, so it would look great on camera, but we want to be fully honest. The specs are out there. I don't know the exact measurement, but these calipers are definitely lighter that went on, and the braking performance is definitely going to be better. We could already feel it with the brake feel while the bike is just here, but you can be sure that when we're done, we're going to take this bike out for a ride, and you guys will be on the ride with me because we'll film the ride. Speaking of the comments that you guys leave, I read your comments. I always read your comments, and one of you guys commented on our rear set episode saying that why don't you make a plug and play rear pressure switch so that when we install the rear sets on our bikes, we could do it easier, because not everyone is confident about splicing and doing wiring work. Well, I read your comments. here it is. We have these available now, just like every other part that we show on our builds. And on each episode, we link them in the description below. This will be there. We have them available for the Panigale V2 and the Panigale V4 models. The plug is exactly the same. The only difference is the length of the cable. So I do read your comments, and that comment was pretty good, and I got it done for you guys. I think that's pretty much for this episode, guys. On the next episode, you guys can expect us to put the bodywork back on. We haven't done it. We were going to do it this episode, but the belly pan piece that we want to put on is not ready quite yet. There's some delays with Nicholas at Auto Laboratory. He's quite busy, and he's doing it as a favor for me just to squeeze it in. Once that's done, you guys will see this bike fully back with fairings, and then I could take it for a ride. But till then, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Until next time, guys, have a good one.